The Rocky Horror Picture Show started out as a critical flop. 50 years later, the beloved film is a cultural phenomenon. Creator Richard O'Brien reflects on how the 1975 movie musical became a haven for the marginalized and disenfranchised. L2R, Tim Curry, Barry Bostwick, and Susan Sarandon in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The Rocky Horror Picture Show debuted in theaters across the United States on September 26, 1975. Photo by Michael Oakes Archives/Getty Images. Gregory Wakeman. Gregory Wakeman, freelance writer. September 25, 2025. Get our newsletter. In 1972, Richard O'Brien was cast as King Herod in Andrew Lloyd Webber's London production of Jesus Christ Superstar. But he was soon fired, as the show's producer didn't like his interpretation of the role. Suddenly, the British actor, musician, and writer found himself at a career crossroads. His son Linus had just been born, and he had no acting work on the horizon. He was even contemplating moving back to New Zealand, where he'd lived in his youth, to get a real job. It was around this time that EMI Studios invited O'Brien to perform some songs at its company Christmas party. "I wrote a song called Science Fiction/Double Feature," he recalls. "I cobbled together about 20 minutes worth of jokes. It was really a test to see if I should give up or carry on. The warm reception made me stick around for a bit longer." O'Brien built on the song primarily to amuse himself, composing a musical that he would personally want to watch. He wrote it in the comedic style of a carry-on film, a hugely popular, bawdy British comedy franchise. O'Brien also wanted to deal with sexuality through sci-fi and throw songs in, he says. The result was the Rocky Horror Show, a musical about a newly engaged couple, Brad and Janet, who take refuge in the castle of cross-dressing mad scientist Dr. Frankenfurter during a storm. After the doctor brings his new muscle-bound creation Rocky to life, the foursome becomes entangled in a love square, all while the castle's alien butler and maid plot to return to their home in outer space. Richard O'Brien, left, and Patricia Quinn, right, on the set of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Photo by Michael Oakes Archives/Getty Images. The Rocky Horror Show's stage premiere took place at the Royal Court Theatre in London on June 19, 1973. The film adaptation, whose name was elongated slightly to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, was released in the United States on September 26, 1975. It proved to be such a flop that the musical was pulled from theaters after just a few weeks. But a few die-hard fans kept returning to see the movie at midnight. From start to finish, Rocky Horror is a light-hearted and very loving parody of horror movies of the 1930s and campy science fiction movies of the 1950s, says Jeffrey Weinstock, editor of the 2008 book Reading Rocky Horror, The Rocky Horror Picture Show and Popular Culture. It unveils, in a not very subtle way, the sexual subtext that existed within all those films. O'Brien says Rocky Horror story and subject matter helped make it a place for the marginalized and disenfranchised to proudly come together, safely be themselves and find a sense of belonging in a communal space. They embraced Dr. Frankenfurter's, Tim Curry, fishnet tights, glittery corset and defiant androgyny, as exemplified by the character belting out the song Sweet Transvestite, then seducing the all-American couple Brad, Barry Bostwick, and Janet, Susan Sarandon. Rocky Horror is the ultimate cult film experience, Weinstock says. It has secured its place in cinema and cultural history. It is the longest-running film to be in consistent circulation. It's a remarkably successful film. To date, the movie, which had a budget of roughly $1 million, has earned an estimated $116 million to $160 million worldwide. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, #TBT trailer 20th Century Fox. Watch on YouTube. Logo. The cross-dressing musical child of the 1960s. Before Rocky Horror achieved cult status as a film, the story got its start as a stage musical in London. O'Brien's West End show was the product of its time, building on and responding to the 1960s counterculture movement, gay and sexual liberation, and second-wave feminism. O'Brien and Jim Sharman, who directed both the film and the stage musical, had previously worked together on experimental theater pieces that helped pave the way for Rocky Horror. These productions included Hair, Jesus Christ Superstar and O. Calcutta, the last of which was a theatrical revue that explored mature themes through numerous sketches and musical numbers. O. Calcutta featured prominent nudity, channeled the glam rock musical genre, had an androgynous aspect, and tapped into the gothic traditions of the horror and sci-fi films of the 1930s and 1950s, Weinstock says. There was even a moment in the early 1970s where pornography nearly achieved cultural acceptance, he adds. Rocky Horror is right on the edge of that in many respects. Despite the shifting cultural climate, O'Brien says he believed that Rocky Horror's audience would dry up within 5 weeks of its premiere. Instead, it became the hottest ticket in town. After a 1-month run at the Royal Court Theatre's 63-seat theatre upstairs, the production moved first to the larger Chelsea Classic Cinema and then to the King's Road Theatre, where it remained until March 1979. Patricia Quinn, left, Tim Curry, center, and Nell Campbell, right. In the Rocky Horror, O'Brien wasn't single-handedly responsible for the musical's artistic flourishes. Costume designer Sue Blaine, set designer Brian Thompson and composer Richard Hartley were all young creatives eager to prove themselves in the industry. Arguably the most important component, though, was the casting of actor Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter. O'Brien, who had previously worked with Curry on Hair, says, "I've often wondered, if it was any other performer, would we have had the same success? He really did step up. He just had this presence, this aura. I remember the women would be looking at him in his German expressionist makeup and his ripped fishnet stockings, and they'd be saying he was attractive, and the men sitting next to them would surprise themselves by agreeing." Rocky Horror's London location enabled it to have a huge influence on the fashion and attitude of the punk movement, which was coalescing at this time in the British capital. People in the punk community of the mid-1970s all wore the same costumes as in Rocky Horror, says Andreas Zare, director of the new documentary Sane Inside Insanity, The Phenomenon of Rocky Horror. They had ripped fishnets and pins. O'Brien remembers Malcolm McLaren, a rock impresario and fashion designer who would later serve as the Sex Pistols' manager, regularly attending Rocky Horror. The musical had a bit to do with the rise of punk, O'Brien says. Not just the clothes, but the 3-chord rock and roll songs. We were right in the middle of all that.